Here we go. There we are. There's our logo, or our flyer. This is the Educators Book Club. This is July 2024. We casually talk about books we've been reading and the valuable ideas they offer. And we like to have audience participation. Sometimes we have a guest author. So that's us three. I'm Mark, and I'm going to just stop sharing for a minute. I'm Mark. I used to be a school teacher many years ago. I used to teach science, but my teaching kind of role now is I teach learning design at a university online, similar to this actually. So, and it's really good. I really enjoy it. So, and I've got a little book to discuss later on, but we might hear from Lottie and Stephen.
Hi, I'm Lottie. I am a New Zealand educator. I was primary trained, so I've worked in primary schools all over the world, actually. And I kind of went into a transition in my career around ESL or EAL, or one of the other words and acronyms related to teaching English as an additional or second language. And then into global citizenship education. And I mainly also work with young people, with teachers online across Australia and in the USA sometimes too. Handball, Stephen.
Well, I'm Stephen. I'm slow to catch handballs, obviously. But yeah, 12 years a teacher and just finishing up my first year in a university and enjoying it muchly. And been reading some books. Ooh.
And wearing a great winter jumper tonight, might I say.
That's right. I had to throw
there's always a few there's always a few comments about fashion of the co-hosts, our jumpers and t-shirts. Mark, tonight I feel like you're vibing the t-shirt guy from Gruen. What's his name? The cool t-shirt.
Oh, man. I don't know.
Samson.
I'm trying not to it's not free advertising.
Adam Sampson.
It's art.
Tell us, what have you been reading?
Okay.
Tell us. I
I'm
know you prepared something.
I have prepared something.
LinkedIn.
I'm gonna share my screen. Okay.
You're starting on a B because you're prepared.
Yes. I listened to this book. Now, this is not an educational book per se. I learned a lot of things about music. It went for 13 hours. Now, the fellow who wrote it and narrates it, you're probably familiar with David Byrne. He is the lead singer. He's the lead singer of a band called Talking Heads. It's very popular in the 1980s and the 1970s as well, 70s and 80s. He's a really interesting guy. So I'm not a music teacher and I don't play an instrument, but curiously enough, I'm really interested in music culturally and educationally, how you learn, even what is music, that kind of thing. So that's why I started listening to this book. Now, there's a particular chapter, and that's why I wanted to talk through it this evening, there's a particular chapter where he talks about how alternatives to how do you teach music. So the book's largely about the culture of music and how it's produced and recorded and the rest of it. But there was this really interesting chapter, and he pointed out that a lot of music education is about teaching the canon of music, like the kind of getting a perfect kind of classical kind of piece, and then everyone learns it and they play in the school band or that type of thing. Sure that there's a curriculum, but according to David Byrne, that a lot of the essence has gone out of teaching music, and it's more about kind of complying and conforming to kind of like the canon, these sort of standard kind of musical pieces. And so he was quite inspired by this thing that's called El Sistema. And here's a little timeline. I've done my research, you can tell. It's this approach to teaching music that was pioneered in Venezuela in 1975. And it's more about it's a community-centered approach. So that gets pretty broad pretty quickly. And it's a global thing that started in Venezuela, but it's gone around the world. And it's basically involving children and other young people. And it's kind of tapping them into maybe playing in a band, but it's kind of seems like it's very student-centered. And the focus is on, again, with community rather than conforming to play a particular, you know, ensemble piece or something like that. Oh, here it is. Here's the map. But then he also mentions this other bloke, David Wish. He lives in San Francisco. He did a similar thing where his program's called Little Kids Rock. And it's basically its focus is on the composition and what the children or the students are bringing to their kind of passion for music and their drive for music. And so it's kind of the center of gravity is quite different. And so this chapter in this book goes into, like maybe the role of music in kind of society, and then how that can be encouraged within schools and how music curricula are designed even. And so I kind of liked that it was sort of like a complementary, if not completely alternative approach. And again, I haven't taught music and I don't play music. So it could be that I don't know what I'm talking about, but it sounded like it was really quite inspiring, this idea that different approaches to how the role of music. I'm going to stop sharing. So I don't know if either of you have had any,
Well,
dealings
Mark,
with.
I didn't know that you were going to talk about Sistema, but interestingly, my sister-in-law, who did a master's of the violin, and my brother are both musicians, and she went to work for Sistema in Aberdeen, Scotland, and
Wow.
was the head of the program out there, and resigned a couple of years ago now, but was out there for about 8 years running the program, in very low socioeconomic areas, classical music. So it's, and where it started South America with those sort of brass bandy instruments. It was very tied to the culture. But yeah, in Scotland, they've been learning classical music, and it does have a very strong community focus. So yeah, funny little tie in there.
Yeah, and how do they run it, or how does it? Well, what is it even? Like I should have done my reading.
You're the one who did your research, Mark.
Yeah.
And this is the point where I should probably know more.
Oh yeah. No, I just like the spirit of it, and it taps into local kind of maybe traditions or something like that. The fact that it's transferable globally, I think, that really caught my attention.
Yeah, and they do kind of match the music styles. I mean, classical in Europe or whatever, but they do match the musical styles to different areas. And it does have a very, very strong, as I said, community focus. They actually lost some funding a couple of years ago, and there was a huge community outcry about it because the families get very involved in it, and traditionally sort of seen as something, not as a pathway out of poverty, but something to give young people hope. And often when they're kind of living in quite difficult, challenging situations as well. So
yeah, cool. Well, that's me done then. I got unless Stephen, have you got any thoughts on what
have either of you ever taught music?
No.
Yeah.
When I did my teacher training in New Zealand as a primary school teacher, one of the first things they taught us is they gave us all a guitar, and they taught us 5 chords, and they gave us a book of 50 songs you can play with primary school children with 5 chords on the guitar. How amazing, how practical, right?
That's great. Brilliant. What did you play? What's one of the songs that we would know?
Let me think now. The Wheels on the Bus.
Oh yeah. No, don't know that one.
This is decades ago, Mark.
No, it's a
Stop
classic.
asking me. Anyway, yes, very practical music education.
Mhm.
So what can you tell us? What have you been reading, Lottie?
Oh, I thought we were going to throw to Stephen.
Oh,
Handle.
we can throw to Stephen.
Go on, Stephen.
No, I'm an unreliable narrator. All right. Well, R Rami is like, well, I've gotta have my tab sorted. I
Bunch
was
of
like, oh, they're
teachers.
not as extensive as Mark's with the the sequenced and even as I said, who's that? And then Mark went, I have a tab for that. Got to see who that person was with the big shoulder pads. I'm not that
Yeah,
prepared.
that was the
But
thing.
well
Oh,
done,
there's
Mark.
small teaching.
Well, I finished it. I think last time we spoke, I was at 41%, and it's I think it needs further bashing from me because
Right.
Yeah, well, let's
I,
hear it then.
I think small teaching colon teaching without any social awareness or skills would be a good subtitle for it.
Oof. Oof.
Oh, that's brutal.
It was pretty bad, Mark, wasn't it? Like the start was fine. You did your learning theory stuff, and you go, "Yep, cool." And then it moved on to such dramatic ideas as talk to your students at the start of a lesson.
But
Oh,
see, it's for a higher ed audience, and a lot of a higher ed audience,
talking is a fairly
you'd
standard
be
session.
surprised. You walk around your own campus and you pop your head in the door. Sometimes they're,
Well, let me reframe it for everyone. So there was
yes.
one professor or lecturer or person, and what they did is before every lesson, they talked to one of their students, and they found that their feedback got better.
Yeah.
Students
No, I remember
found
that
them
bit.
to be better people.
I think that's good advice. Keep it simple. It's meeting these higher ed academics where they're at.
That's true. But I see it as a bit of a bigger picture question, which is that it's like the heart is missing. So it's like I talk to people and my faceless survey results went up. Instead of I talk to people, it was a core human
Oh,
experience
you
that
mean
I
it's
really
linked?
enjoyed
It's
before.
still linked to kind of metrics and documentation and
Yeah.
career
Or the
progression.
or perhaps the fact that, talk to people is seen as a helpful tip means it's absent is
Yeah, and so
concerning.
then there was one moment that got me a little bit like choked up, teary type thing, which
Ooh.
is something that the
I'm
as a
dying to know what
long-time
it
teacher,
is.
you don't have to do much to pull on the heartstrings of me, but he said, hey, he had his students do presentations, and they were the worst things ever. And one kid talked for 40 minutes and had no structure and had no idea what they're doing, right? And you're thinking, did you teach them at all? And then, of
Yeah.
course, he says,
Did
and
you
I
give
didn't
them
teach
some
them at
parameters?
all. And I thought, But then the next time he taught them, okay, good thinking. But he
Mm.
did tell quite a nice little story of, and they were the best things ever. Oh no, he gave a seminar. So he'd say, for example, Mark, give us your speech. And then Mark would say, well, my speech is, and then he'd say, no, Mark, stop, take a breath, start again. And Mark would be like, what? Let me do my speech. And then the second time, Mark would be more confident. Yeah, this is explaining teaching to a teacher. But anyway, and then eventually everyone in the room understood that what the teacher lecturer guy, James, in this case, was doing was teaching them. And then the presentations that resulted were the best thing ever. But the way he explained it, I was actually like, oh, that's nice. Oh, look at you go,
Yeah,
because
well,
up until that point, it set up such a low bar of human warmth that I was just
Oh.
like, oh,
it's a
Can you
system.
give it the rising love hearts or something, please,
Oh,
Mark?
yeah, maybe
Come
if I
on.
does that does that work?
how can I do that?
Hang
And it
on.
reminded me, I've just come back from a conference, and there was a woman who spoke about primary school age students. It was in the context of Gert Biesta,
There
who
they
talks about
go.
learnification, which is kind of what I talked about just before. There we go. But anyway, in the context of that, she basically said there was a kid and his mate had a really nice bottle and he smashed the bottle by doing something stupid. And then she said to him, you know, your friend's in trouble. What should we do? And the kid was like, oh, I don't know. Nothing. I'll write a letter, and came up with all the kind of teachery type things. And then she eventually said, what do you think you should do? And he straightened up and he said, I've got some money at home. I could get the money and I'll buy a new bottle and I'll take it to my friend, and then that'll fix all of the problems that I've created, and that'd be good. And she talked about how he became transformed and, you know, much more confident. He stood up straight and he knew that he was powerful and he had made a decision and he'd done the right thing. And I was like, cool. We don't really hear enough. I think we don't hear enough people talking about, like, you know, the whole bizzo of like being a human being and kind of like how that's sort of important. And then I won't waffle on for too long, but then I read Deschooling Society by Ivan Illich because it's on Spotify. And
What's that
he was
about?
saying basically we don't need schools because people can just learn from people that they like. So you can tell from the fadedness of the cover that it's old, pre-internet days.
70s, isn't it? 70s?
He was a contemporary of Paolo Freire or Freire, or however people, depending on how honestly you're pronouncing it. And so he you know, that he helped him write this book. But it's basically, we don't need schools. We can just, there you go. That's
Wow.
my list for next month, I reckon. But yeah, you don't need schools. You can just pair people up. And again, as I said, this is pre-internet, so it kind of ties in well to Lottie's from last month. It's sort of, which was early internet. This is like, you just use the radio and you find someone who's interested in something you want to talk about. In our case,
We're doing it now.
That's right. And so a lot of the things were sort of like, oh yeah, that's a MOOC, you know, or that's a whatever, like that already happens. But yeah, so I wasn't thoroughly convinced, but he did make some good capitalist points. You know, curriculum needs to be new, and you got to, like any product, you got to rejig it just because so there's a new textbook to buy and stuff like that. But
did he talk about the open curriculum anywhere in his?
He did not. No.
But it sounds like he alluded to it.
Yeah, it sort of was definitely heading down that path, but sort of probably in Mark's early days, handwritten letters and radio communication, you know. Not to say Mark's that old, but when he was doing early online learning, as we'd call it now.
Oh, yes. Yeah, definitely.
Packets and cassette tapes. And
we used to get a slingshot and we'd slingshot the learning materials out the window out to the learners.
I'm not even sure if you're joking.
Off you go, Crow.
But anyway, those are my books. I also read other non-education books, but you know, those two kind of made a logical through line that I could talk to for once.
So with that one that you just showed us, is that kind of like, did it kind of go anywhere, or are those ideas, you know, is it kind of like a bit of a pendulum?
It was basically, it was hard for me to kind of come to many sort of conclusions because a lot of the solutions have since kind of just happened and not really worked out in the way that we think.
Isn't that any kind of in that territory anyway? Or is that a bit controversial for me to say that?
No, it was more like, oh yeah, we kind of have that and it was all right, but we still sort of need to spend time together, kind of thing. You know, it was like, what if you could talk to anyone anywhere? It's like, yep, we can. Thanks, Ivan. Don't know. Wasn't much to take forward, but maybe pedagogy of the oppressed will be more you know, people talk about it a lot. It was referenced at the conference I was just at last week, so
Oh,
it must
Sounds like it was
go.
your book was coming at a time when there was starting to be open critique about the, you know, the industrial style school, the school as an industrial style kind of product. I don't know when that conversation started in the mainstream, but that basically sounds like, you know, we talk about that all the time at the moment, but we're talking what, 50 years ago now or 40
yeah,
years
it's
ago.
talked about
So
100 years ago, and like it's sort of surprising reading little references like, oh, okay. I I was surprised to hear that there were challenges to that industrial approach of like and I don't do a lot of educational reading of academic literature. I do it as much as I need to, but I guess it's yeah. I find it really interesting though that what you're saying, Lottie, that you know the kind of like it's not. I don't believe it's a more of a contemporary issue. It's kind of maybe. Oh, I don't know where I've interrupted you, and I don't even have a complete sentence.
well, it's certainly not a contemporary issue. I think it's always probably been debated. It's just the scale of the debate. It's very mainstream now. And whereas I think it was probably seen as more sort of, you know, intellectual conversations, pockets, you know, that kind of disagreed with the mainstream education in the past. I don't know. Do we agree? Am I
No, yeah.
throwing?
I think it's like a perennial thing. Like you could say, who's that guy who passed away? Famous guy, TED Talk person. Like he was pushing similar
Ken
points.
Robinson? No,
That's the guy. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, but similar
Ken
points.
Robinson.
sir.
Oh
Ken
yeah,
Robinson. There you go.
that geezer.
But yeah, it was kind of like very similar to those talking points, but instead of saying like, it'd be like, well, in Cuba, they do whatever they want. And in Vietnam, and kind of like, you know, very, yeah, not your countries that are top of Pisa. Let's just say that. So it's kind of like an interesting context, but many of the arguments are sort of, they was, I would imagine, revolutionary at the time, but now it's like, oh yeah, everyone talks about that. That's de rigueur. Anyway, what about you, Lottie?
Oh, what about me? I read 2 books. Well, I read more books, but I will share 2 books this month. And quick roundup of both. The first one is Semi-Educated. It's an Amber Press. I actually read it like yesterday afternoon on the couch. I whizzed through it. I absolutely laughed my little tummy out or off. I don't know what's it.
Bit of a mixed metaphor, but I like it. Your little tummy fell out. Good. Okay.
Laugh my head off. Yeah, something like that. Georgie worked as a professional. She was a lawyer, and then she was like, "Hey, you know, I'm going to go and change the world. I'm going to become a teacher." And it's a very like self-deprecating, irreverent, you know, reflection on, you know, 7 years of teaching or the first couple of years. And she's just hilarious. She sort of sets it up going through her teacher training. You know, she, you know, chapters are called "A Bit of Shush, Please," and you know, and has these little funny cartoons at the front of each one with a little saying like, "I'm sorry, is my teaching interrupting your talking?" Uh, you know, so she uses lists in her book quite a bit. My favorite, I think, it's hard to choose my favorite, but is how she describes different types of subject teachers by what they wear and their clothing, and a very big generalization and stereotyping, but it is very funny. And then at the end, she kind of just absolutely takes the jokes out of herself by setting some fake little English assignments about this book where, you know, she's really just, again, being very self-deprecating. So highly recommend it. Very funny. Stephen, I know that you said if you gave small teaching to someone for Christmas, they might not be so happy. Give this to someone for Christmas. It's great. It's so funny. I can think of like so many people I'd give this to and they'd love it. So There you go.
How does it compare to your, say, Gabby Stroud teacher, the teacher who quit and they're super sad, blah, blah, blah. I'm imagining we're at the other end of the spectrum of.
Yeah, she doesn't talk about leaving teaching in it. She's just kind of like at the end of the book, she's like, yeah, I'm in my groove now. I know what I'm doing, but it's feel good. It's kind of very honest about, what teaching can be like, what society really asks of teachers, what it's like to balance being a parent or a mother and being a teacher, and how you often have to sacrifice your own children's sort of events and things to be a teacher. But it's all told through a very humorous kind of lens. And so it's light, it's funny, there's nothing kind of terribly sad about it, in the sense that you leave kind of feeling like, oh no, will she be okay? Did I answer the question? I don't know.
And did you do the assignments at the end, or?
I thought about them. They were great. They were very funny. They were very funny. This one I also read. It was awesome. Hope is a verb. 6 steps to radical optimism. This obviously ties into my work, and I use these types of books quite a bit with young people, with the action projects that I work with them. What I like about this book, thank you, Kirsty Costa, who put me onto this, is this one has got, these 6 steps, but it's just filled, Mark, I feel like you'd love this, with these beautiful graphics. It's kind of a mix between a graphic novel, and
It looks great.
it's so colorful. It's got lots of just sort of sayings in it. It's a coffee table style book. You pop it on your coffee table, flick through it, but there's some ideas in there. And she tells her story too. She kind of goes from like freaking out about like the state the world's in and wanting to be a sustainability warrior to like, empowering herself, and how do we kind of do that just through 6 easy steps. There you go. That's all it takes, guys. 6 easy steps. You don't need to have climate anxiety anymore.
Yeah, what sort of issues are kind of addressed in this sort of
She's an eco writer. She's got an Insta handle, which you can follow, Insta M. But she kind of looks at it more through like the sustainability of the planet and the climate crisis. But she doesn't talk specifically about that. She's just saying whatever it is that you are worried about in society, you want changed. There's a way to kind of address it, and it's it's fun. It's hopeful. And hope is active as well, which I like. It's very similar to the Jane Goodall book I shared last year, The Book of Hope, Dr. Jane Goodall. Yeah, except Dr. Jane Goodall's is a little bit more sort of serious and doesn't have all the pretty pictures.
Now, what are we going to do now? Because I've got something I could talk about.
Oh, yeah, and we should see too if we've got some audience members. If you want to share, then pop a message in the chat, and we'll get ready to bring you up. But Mark, you've got something else you want to share?
It does have a tie-in with our participants in the room. About the book Who Gets to Be Smart. I don't know if either of you have read that. Who Gets to Be Smart by, I think it's by Bree Lee. That her?
Yes.
Is it ringing a bell?
Yes, Bree Lee, Brillee.
I think I'm about. I said that I had actually finished reading it, but I think I'm about maybe 5 pages. Yeah. So I bought it when it first came out. I thought, what a strange book. I'm going to just buy this because I kind of thought, it'll give an insight into this whole area that I don't really know much about. But I found it was really quite interesting. Malika, I don't know if you've got any comments or you want to put something in the chat about whether you're enjoying it, or Alicia.
Yeah,
probably the same.
Can I speak?
Oh yes, certainly.
Or do you want me to type?
I'll
whatever
be quiet.
you prefer. No. I actually went to this. I took my kids to a gorgeous little bookstore in Geelong, probably about a year ago, and was talking to someone about just wanting something that was linked to education, and they recommended it. And it took me probably, 8 months before I actually opened it to start reading it. Similar to what you were saying, just a lot in it already that I didn't know much about. I didn't know anything about, for example, Rhodes Scholars and the process, or how to become a Rhodes Scholar, and just about systems through a lot of our institutions. So it's I'm finding it a challenge to get through, and that it's in parts a bit dry. But I feel as though I'm learning a lot of things that definitely weren't on my radar before. So I'm enjoying that part of it. But I'm only about halfway through.
Would you recommend it to, say, colleagues at your school?
I would. I've got a couple of colleagues that I know would enjoy it, because we often have these conversations around just I guess privilege, and we talk to our students a lot about privilege and having choice and having options. But I think by the time I get home and get everything done, it's a tough read for me in the evening. That's the only thing that would stop me from recommending it to too many people. But that might change as I get further through.
I have a
I
really
would
strong
probably
memory
agree with
of
that.
not
Yeah.
liking it. I
What's
think I
that,
picked it
Stephen?
up and put it. I think I picked it up and put it down. I've got a strong memory of being very disappointed with it. But as you're talking, I'm like, what was it? Like, I think maybe does she start talking about like as a Rhodes Scholar in London or something? And I
Yeah,
was
yeah,
like,
definitely.
oh,
Well, it's very much about her experience meeting up with a friend who's a Rhodes Scholar and talking about exploring the university campus, and kind of bits that come up. So it is quite slow. But I actually said to one of my colleagues when I ordered it, when I bought it in the store, I said, "Oh, have you read this? What do you think?" And they said, "Yeah, read it, but didn't love it." But I'll sit with it a bit longer and see how I go.
well, I'll have to try it again. Alicia, what do you think? Are you in
Oh,
defense
look,
of Bree?
so I've got to jump in at this point. I rate her, Bree Lee. I thought Eggshell Charlotte was fantastic, and I read it like years ago when I heard her speak. I could not get into it, that book at all.
Wow.
Like, you kind of got like a chapter, but look, also, I don't read like, nonfiction for pleasure. I read nonfiction for work. So I want to read like fiction. So Eggshell Charlotte, I thought, was incredibly written by her. So literally just the other week, I picked up The Work, which is her new book, and it's fiction. And oh my God, I read it in like 24 hours, and I just like thoroughly enjoyed it. Completely fiction, completely different writing from her. I even like within the day was seeing one of my editors and was like, "Oh, you have to read this."
And I'm thinking, I don't want to go out on a limb. It was a very white with a capital 4 perspective on things, and I sort of went, this is not what the title promised. The answer to who gets to be smart shouldn't be, well, I was sitting with my white friends at the White University of Whitington, and then we said, oh, it
Daddy.
does get to be. It's like, anyway, I'll have to read it again. I'll
That's
give it another
hilarious.
go.
I'm not going to bother, to be honest with you.
Okay. But I'll just.
I think
I wouldn't
might be other
bother
things to
if you haven't already.
Yeah.
My whole issue was that I'd gone to the effort of going into the store, taking the recommendation, and then I almost felt as though if I don't read it, I'm letting my children down, I'm letting the person in the bookstore down. So I've made a commitment
Teacher
now.
guilt.
But the terrible thing is now you've passed that on to me. Now I'm like, well, it was mentioned in the book club. I'm going.
I don't know. I just don't think you should have that guilt. If you don't finish it, you don't finish it. It is what it is.
But you know what? It also raises a really interesting thing, because I am trying very hard to read more, and I have been trying to get through this book over the last kind of month or so, and in the meantime picked up quite a different fiction book, which I was going to include in the list, but I was quite ashamed to. But I read it in about, it was probably just as long, and I read it in about 4 hours. I couldn't put it down. And I definitely cancelled one of my kids' play dates just so that I could finish the book. So
Oh, you have to tell us now.
It's it's Untold by Snej Wood.
Don't know it.
What
Yeah,
does that
I'm
mean?
just going to
Nobody
leave that
knows
there.
it.
What does that
But
mean
what
that
I-
Lottie knows it?
what I wanted to focus on was, it's just that having a break from reading everything about teaching and education, and just showed me that I can still get through a book in just a few hours. So maybe that's saying a lot about the original book too.
Milika, you also mentioned thanks for your feedback. That was you, right?
Yeah, so that was a recommendation from a colleague of mine, Ellen Moffat, who, as a parting gift, said this would be really, really helpful. I work as a professional learning coach as well, and one of our campus goals is really to look at feedback. But I was finding that everyone has kind of different ideas of around feedback and how it works and what it is and what it can look like. So we've actually got this book as part of our kind of campus executive book club at the moment.
And what's it like?
It's pretty. If I'm finding it pretty interesting, I'm finding that it affirms a lot of things that I've already experienced and familiar with. But I think just the more times you hear it, the more ingrained it becomes. I guess just the reminder around or affirmation of it kind of similar to the 5 love languages. It's the same kind of principle that everyone wants feedback, but they want it in a way that suits them when it suits them. Otherwise, they're not viewing it as valuable and impactful feedback. So it's I like the way it's written. I'm finding it pretty easy to read, but I'll be keen to hear what I've actually purchased it for 6 members of our team. So we'll see how that goes.
Have you noticed,
Right.
Malika, I'm assuming you've been giving feedback for a number of years to staff. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have. Yeah.
Have you noticed any changing trends in that?
I've found that particularly over the last 2 years or so, there's been an openness to staff actually seeking out our teachers actually wanting more feedback. I think in the past it's really been, we've said, it's an invitation, but not many people were coming to the party. And it wasn't something that we wanted to force on and say, this is what we're doing and you need to accept it. But the more we offer it in different ways, we're finding that staff are now at the point where it's normal for them to ask someone to come into their classroom and give them feedback on something, or line up a coaching conversation and actually unpack a few things. So it's just a shift in that openness and that culture.
What's the context for the teachers? Is it a high school or is it higher ed?
So for us, it's ECLC through to year 9 at our campus, and we're a small campus, but everyone's willing to work together. I think it's that cross program. We've constantly got junior school teachers coming into the middle school and vice versa. So the challenge has been for us working out what our priorities are in the first place and where we're going in order to know what we need feedback on, and we're getting closer to that, I feel.
It's great though that it sounds like it's a kind of a really good culture, like of being trusting your colleagues and the whole the value of feedback.
Can I ask, Alicia, should I read Beauty by Bree Lee? You read that one?
Which one?
Beauty by Bree Lee. Is that good?
Oh, no, I didn't read that one. That's only that's only an essay.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I don't, I love a
probably
book.
non-fiction.
This one's it's Robert Keegan. How the way we talk can change the way we work.
Okay.
That's the one. anyway, it was just talking about complaints at work and commitment behind complaints and how to reframe things. And I'm finding that all of these approaches to feedback and professional learning and supporting staff and the cultural impacts are huge, but it's really hard to articulate them sometimes and then quantify those. Not that we have to quantify everything, but yeah, it's had a really good impact. Yeah, that's the one, orange and red.
I'll add it to the Wakelet.
I think Ramia's got something she was briefly unmuted, which is the universal Zoom Zoom sign for I had
No, I'm going to be a listener today because I'm enjoying the conversation. I was just going to say, ask Milika if it was we need to talk, because we read that book last year as our leadership team in our school. So it sounded similar. So that's what I was just going to ask her. But
Okay.
I'll put you next time. I'm going to be a listener today.
Tell us next month about that book too, if you want.
Yeah, sure. No worries. Thank you.
Well, I'd love to whinge about a fiction book if you can.
Go.
Everyone's
a literature critic. With screenshot.
I pulled it up. Yep. So based on the last time my LinkedIn posted, someone said you have to read The Great Undoing based on your books. And I was like, ooh. And I
looks
found
like
this
a contemporary concept.
Confusing. I don't know if anyone else does this, but often I'll finish a book and then I'll go onto Goodreads, go to the reviews and go to the bad ones to see if it wasn't just me. In this case, I went to the 3-star one and somebody said, this book was too smart for me. I don't understand what happened. And I was like, thank God I didn't really understand either. So it's like, maybe it's to Alicia's point. She writes nonfiction really, 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 really well. Like she'll say, oh, here's some Indigenous knowledge that's really interesting and fascinating. And then it'll switch over to like, and now the characters. And I'm like, I don't know who the characters are. There were only 3 and I couldn't tell you 2 things about them. So it was kind of like, it would switch almost from nonfiction to fiction. And when it was fiction, I just wanted the nonfiction and not the other bits. There was something called Blood Talk. I don't know what it is. I didn't understand it, but it was a really nicely written book. It was the kind of thing that I was like, wow, this is literature. This is amazing. But at the end of the day, I was like, I have no idea what happened. Or right at the end, there was just a character called Buttrose or something who wasn't introduced. I don't know if it was a he or a she, or it was confusing. Anyway, if anyone else would like to read it so that they could share in my confusion, let me know.
No, thank you.
I was going to say,
maybe,
no thanks.
Maybe I'm
up.
stupid. Maybe I'm stupid. I listened to it in an audio book, but I can normally work out what's going on. I got to the end and I was like, I'm not really sure what happened there, but I really enjoyed the bits, the non-fiction bits. From the home of maple syrup. And kind of she talks from the perspective of that group, which I can't quote off the top of my head, but
Indigenous group.
Literally, like, it actually talks about like the process of the old process of harvesting maple syrup and how it took ages, but it was lovely, and the whole hut.
Time. Is it about like the different relationships with time?
Yeah, and the main metaphor is like, without overcomplicating it, and from memory, there's like 3 plants that kind of like grow in a cycle, and you harvest one and then the other one comes up, and then you harvest that one and the other one comes up, and they sort of sustain one another and those sort of things, and how it's all beautiful. And she's a botanist, so it's very planty, which didn't necessarily make a lot of sense to me as a baseline, but it was just very beautifully written, very quotable. So there's a lot of people who like, oh, that's a really beautiful way of explaining a connection to nature, those sort of things. It is fairly long.
Did you listen to it or read it?
I think I did a bit of both, but 400 pages. So, probably could have done with a bit of an edit, but that would kind of go against sort of what it was saying. It's
about
kind of
treating time.
Did you
the
listen
whole
to
point
the
was sort of,
on double speed? Well, just to get through it.
ironically, Mark, you know that I did.
1.2.
But yes, it's very, enjoy your life,
Poetic
drink your
and
tea,
philosophical and
lyrical, poetic, beautifully written. But yeah, at times a little bit too botany, whatever
Botanical?
whatever the verb or
So what was the
adjective. But
upshot? Was it like kind of, making adjustments to improve our world, or, seeking wisdom from ancient methods, or what was the big idea?
there was no upshot other than take your time,
Oh,
do
well,
things
that's an upshot.
properly.
Yeah.
You can learn from Indigenous wisdom, sort of, but not like many of the books we read where it's like there's an acronym and a t-shirt and a, and a printout, that kind of thing. All
So
right,
we're in our
Untold.
last final 5 minutes, but
how do we get here?
Well, we've got an embarrassing share of Untold. Let me share that in. I had it open already. It was on my list.
Don't judge me.
yeah,
Right.
this woman's an influencer.
I feel as though I need to give more context here and say it was third week of school holidays. I needed a break.
Oh yeah.
You don't need to give
No
any
need to
context. Teachers are
justify
allowed to read whatever they want.
just pick a book up and read it,
Yeah.
drawn
No, I
to
take
it.
it back. Before she went on The Bachelor, that's
In Semi-Educated, Georgie talks about just, avoiding all the, teacher reading and just reading romance novels, the need to just unwind and,
What did you
I also
learn
really
from
it was
Snez's story?
it was the margins were quite big and the font was big. So it was doing all of the things. It was being everything I needed it to be. But it was just really nice to read about someone else's life. And in a very kind of casual, informal way. But also, as Stephen said, there was mention of The Bachelor, and I distinctly remember watching that on my couch. Again, don't judge me. But it.
That was going to be my follow-up question. Did you know her before?
I do, and now as well. But so it was interesting to get a different perspective, because our kids are friends. So it that was interesting. I think there was one page in there that I actually took a photo of because I thought I need to read this again, and it was just actually talking about the challenge of being a mother and having a career and that juggle that you feel. And it was just really interesting hearing it from. I think it's always interesting hearing that from other people, and hearing their experience, because it's not always something that is shared honestly, and I felt it really was shared quite openly and honestly. So I think for the 3 and a bit hours that I spent reading it, that one page really stuck out for me and kind of made it worthwhile.
It is always, as a mother, it is always interesting hearing. I find it very interesting hearing people share that perspective, Malika. Except I have to say, when I was pregnant and I went into a bookshop in South Melbourne, and the bookstore recommended Beck Judd's The Baby Bible book to me, and I didn't know who Beck Judd was. I'm not from Australia, so I didn't know who she was. Bought the book. And then there was a whole chapter on take the pressure off when you have a baby shower. And then there's these photos of like them having it in like a castle. I think it was actually in a castle. I
Yeah,
was
you
just
have to.
like, what? Yeah.
Where did you do yours? In the boat.
Footscray Park, and I can tell you there were water rats running along the wall in the background. We had to move the tables because I have a fear of rats. So, there you go. It was a little bit different from backyards.
The castle was booked, I imagine. So your second option was Footscray Park with the rats. Ah, funny.
And my mother-in-law just reassuring me over and over, it's fine, it's fine. Me having a nervous breakdown in the corner. Anyway.
Well, on that note, I think
Yeah. Look at that.
the Footscray rats.
Hey.
Oh, there you go.
So thanks everyone who participated, who joined us for our little event. Is there anything we need to say before we wrap it up?
Next month, what are we doing, Stephen and Mark?
More books?
Probably
Yes.
more of the same, I reckon. Less books. We'll talk about less books. We'll do a movie one, I reckon.
Movie. Excellent.
Maybe
We
do
may
The
have
Bachelor based on the chat.
we
Bring out
may
the
have
Bachelor talk.
Well,
we
there
may
you
have
go.
the connection curricula with Matt.
Yeah, we
I
can
like
do that.
Ramia's feedback. A mix of information, interest, and intrigue. Yeah, we'll have to track
Just
down
like a staff
Matt.
room, Ramya. Just like a staff room.
That was the vibe we were heading for, yes. So the staff room kind of banter, I guess. Quite a wide range of
Really cool. Got our own book club. I might come to that one too.
So we'll try and track down that author for next month. We'll see how we go.
All the books that we have mentioned today are on a Wakelet, which we share in a LinkedIn chat that we're all in. And if you know anyone who wants to join, let us know. Oh, welcome.
Cool. Well, hey,
Yeah.
well, I think we might wrap it up then. So thanks everyone. Thanks Lottie and thanks Stephen. Been
Thanks,
good.
host.
I'll see if that worked. Oh yeah, does it work? No, I'm trying to get it to be automatic, but no. Never mind. Just use the React at the bottom there. That's
Beautiful.
so.
Bye.
We'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks for coming, people.
Thanks for
Bye.
coming.